Good afternoon, and welcome to Lighting the Candle, A World That Works. I'm Bill Carell, and I've got with me my two favorite lady friends, Jan Jeremias and Lisa Sheehan. And you're right. If I'm with other ladies, they're my favorite lady friends too. So just keeping it real. That said, um, still having some COVID symptoms. I don't know if I've got long COVID or not, but I'll tell you what. I've got something to read to you that was forwarded to us by our producer Eric Lopkin, which I think is a absolutely marvelous thing for us to do. Join the Modern Observer Group Year-End Challenge. There is an epidemic of people feeling alone. Reach out to 30 people between now and the end of the year by email, text, or phone call. Please tell them you appreciate them and that you are thinking of them. Help us spread the word that there is always someone you can turn to. Always, always, always. Thank you. And thank you too, Eric. So from there, it just came to me that in the vein of comparing and contrasting and distinguishing two words, both separate and with each other, we haven't talked about force and power very much recently. And I think it's a timely conversation to distinguish what possibly might be the difference, because I do feel that sometimes uh, people mislabel both of those words when they actually mean the other one. So, with that said, I'd like to welcome both you, Jan and Lisa, and flip it over to you for a minute. And do you think these are talk worthy?
No, they have to be talk worthy, especially in our. Well, it's probably in the. I was going to say modern world, but I'm sure it's had its place throughout history with we as humans. But the thing that came to mind was um, that might not be accurate. I'll pull up the definitions too to get that at some point. But force seems to be something that you impose on someone, whether they're willing or not to take it, and power can be good or bad depending on how you use it, and isn't necessarily. I mean, it's probably in one faction of its use is forced upon people, but is it necessarily forced? So I think there's a slight difference right there, and I'll look up both of them. I'll start with force in a minute.
I think
So
that's a pretty good off the cuff beginning. Jan, you have thoughts?
Well, my first I was a sci-fi junkie, so my first reaction was "May the force be with you." So I didn't really look at it as being necessarily negative. And I also didn't look at the word power as being something because I think of personal power and to feel empowered. So I took it a little bit differently. I obviously could have interpreted it and do interpret it like Lisa, but I also interpret it as I just mentioned.
Yeah, there's in the English language, they say it's 100 times more difficult to learn English than it is Chinese, because whatever figures that they have, they've come to some sort of a convention that this always means this. It's not like where we have a word like force that can probably have a dozen different ways that it impacts the other words in the sentence. But it's like, so for instance, without a show of force, we did this, or in order to be the force that we want, we're going to have to do this. I'm going to force you to do something now against your will. And that means because I'm bigger than you are, I can make that happen. Or how about you're a force of nature? I mean, it just goes on and on and on. The context of our language is just so ambiguous for a lot of people. But Lisa, have you found a definition or two?
well, it's interesting because force can actually obviously be a noun or a verb. And as a noun, it's strength or energy as an attribute of physical action to movement, or coercion or compulsion, especially with the use or threat of violence. As a verb, it's make a way through or into by physical strength, break open by force, or make someone do something against their will. So there's not a lot of positivity in those definitions.
You had two little quickies at the beginning there that said that force might be okay, but everything after that was building a case for force not being so cool, you know?
Right.
And how about power?
Let me look that one up. Talk amongst yourselves.
Okay,
Well,
and after you said that, Bill, about multiple meanings for the same words, depending, and I thought that's what makes communication so challenging sometimes because you use a word, which, for example, I wouldn't like. I use the word. I think of the word power as empowerment or force, like may the force, meaning a higher power, be with you, and someone else might not interpret it like that.
yes.
So it makes conversations or communication sometimes challenging when you're not thinking of the word in the same way.
Yeah, and we do use it sometimes as a noun when we're referring to groups of people that are very powerful, like for instance, police force or the armed forces or something of that nature. And there's an implication that there's something kind of dormant there that is capable of great things when working together. So, do we have a working definition for power yet?
Yeah, sure. And same thing. Obviously, it could be a noun or a verb. As a noun, it's the ability to do something or act in a particular way, especially as a faculty or quality, or the capacity or ability to direct or influence the behavior of others or the course of events. And then as a verb, it's to supply a device or with mechanical or electrical energy, and then to move or travel with great speed or force.
Thoughts, Jan?
Hmm. Well, I was thinking. I don't think. Read the last part again. I don't know when, Lisa, because I want to get because I was yeah. Please.
Well, as a verb, it's more like action. So to supply energy, which is a force, or to move or travel with great speed or force. So, I mean, in our situation, I think we're dealing more with the noun, the ability to do something or act in a particular way, especially as a faculty or quality, and the capacity or ability to direct or influence the behavior of others or the course of events.
So there's an implication with power that I think is distinct from force.
Mm.
Force force kind of indicates you get all of it, and power I infer meaning my little finger right here can cause the world to change, and the power would be that ability to have the force available and not need it. So, for instance, using the Star Wars analogy, when Yoda lifts the jet airplane out of the swamp with one finger to demonstrate to Luke that it's possible, and then drops it back in again. There were a lot of other things that he could have done to really call for the whole force to be manifest in that moment. So then he turns around and he looks away and he looks back, and there's Luke sitting up on top of the thing, floating 3 or 4 feet off the ground, having realized after the demonstration, all he needed to do was not to try to make it happen, but to have the power, come with him and just create the thought and then have that thought, move the object. So we talk about things being forceful or powerful. In a lot of times when we talk about somebody being powerful, if we're talking about their ability to make people do something that they don't want to do, like there's a power struggle or there's that sort of thing going on, or the people that are in power will do this, that, and the other thing. We can also have a young lady who stands at the front of the room and speaks very quietly, and everybody in the room listens intently. That's very powerful. There's an expectation of the greatness that that youngster is coming out with, and That power is not created by her. That power is the force in the room that gets drawn to her, and then the expectation that she will be great in what she has to say, and she's speaking very softly. So many different ways to experience the world. It's quite interesting.
And as you were saying that, I was thinking if she's up there sharing her knowledge, then she's not forcing it on you, so you can, she's using her power but not forcing it.
Well, here's a mind picture for you. And if you think about, Greta Thunberg standing at the United Nations, chastising all of the people that she's never met before, and admonishing them with "How dare you?" Some people interpreted that as powerful. Other people felt that they were being forced to listen. And the difference between force there and power, if you're in an interaction with somebody and you choose to be in that interaction and there's just a whole lot of energy, that might be on the powerful side. But again, if you're in a situation where there's a whole lot of energy and it seems to be directed at you like a fire hose, that might be feeling a little bit more like force. And I guess it's like, when are you detained? When are you detained by somebody? When a reasonable person would not expect that they could leave at their own will. So it just comes up over and over again in interactions between human beings. I've been watching some interesting um, YouTube videos about traffic stops and people who are actually constitutional auditors going into a public space, exercising their, First Amendment right to photograph or record something in a public space. And what people go through, you know, on the cusp, thinking this isn't right. They should not have the ability to do that, but they're not saying that from being grounded in the power of knowing what the language in the Constitution says. They're just saying that from they're in the authority, like the police who stop somebody and then don't ask them the succession of questions that need to be asked. Those folks are being forceful, and they're causing people to react and do the things that they tell them to do. And in many cases, they're not actually lawful commands or lawful requests. And the power is to be able to know what the facts actually are and quietly tell the officer, you can do that, but you're giving up your right of qualified immunity, which basically means I'm educating you now and telling you how you are taking my First Amendment rights from the Constitution. And anything you say further after that and along the same line means I can sue you for cause. So it's really kind of an interesting thing, the just a little nuance when somebody decides that they're going to work with somebody. And I always felt like, that notion and the image of two people dancing together, where there's clearly a lot of energy, especially if they're doing the jive or something that's really high energy and a lot of movement and kicking and you know as opposed to two people trying to wrestle on the dance floor. Neither one of them knows what they're doing, but they're both trying to get the other one to do better, right?
When you were speaking, Bill, there was an element of like the word that came to my mind was honesty.
Hmm.
And it was interesting because last week somebody approached me through LinkedIn and asked me if I would have a meeting with them or whatever. And so, um, and the way they phrased what the meeting was about was not anything that was not what the meeting was about. And it was kind of like this bait and switch kind of thing where they were
Yeah.
trying to get me on the meeting for some reason. And I just, at that point, even if I had totally believed in what the guy was saying, I couldn't have heard him because I felt very betrayed and kind of somewhat used. And so there was this element of, obviously there was this element of power, was that like I was there. I guess I could have gotten off, but I'm too polite for that. So I kind of I kind of let him do his spiel and then I got off, but I was a little bit like resentful for the fact that he was just not upfront telling me what he wanted. And so this element of honesty came up in my brain when you were just talking.
Yeah. Yeah, and again, the interpretation of the words on both ends of the sender and the receiver. I think we've talked about this a little bit before. Electronics recognized that that was a problem really, really early on. That communication, in order for things to function in a predictable and reliable fashion, there had to be verification that the message is coming, the message is here. I got this message. Here's the message I received. Is that the message you sent? You know, that you can do that at the speed of light. Human beings have a little bit more difficulty paying attention to their processing of the conversation and the intent of the words. And there's, and actually, it's kind of a crutch and an early on training wheels sort of a thing to use those sentences. This is what I heard you say, and I'm wondering if this is what you meant, you know? And then as people get more developed in terms of being engaged with great listeners and great speakers, that the need to have those training wheels goes away. But in the beginning, where people might be tempted to jump to DEFCON 5 and go for your throat, it might be nice to stop for a minute and verify whether or not what you heard is what actually got said, right?
Yeah, I mean, this was just, experience. It was a first meeting. It was a one-on-one. I really didn't know him, but the conversation sounded like it was going to be, it was very different than what he had originally approached me for or said in the message. And that's that's not who I am. And so I was kind of like, okay, well, I'll listen to you, but right away it left that very bad feeling in my mouth, a very bad feeling inside as to who he was and what type of person he was. So it was just interesting.
Well, while you're saying that, you and I are both master networkers. We meet and talk with a whole lot of new people every year. And every once in a while, somebody will stand out as being so inept as a networker and so off-putting in terms of their first impression. And I had just that sort of thing happen with a guy who was a financial planner probably 6, 7 years ago. He came out to my, to my office, over by the golf course where I was in those days, and he proceeded to run on about himself for 45 minutes. I mean, he did not take a breath. It was just one thing after another, after another, after another. And I just sat there. And you know how sometimes you go someplace else and start singing the Star Spangled Banner or whatever it is that's going to get you through this moment and keep you from strangling the person in front of you. The honesty came at the end when he finally took a breath, and I got to say, "Well, enough about me. What would you like to talk about?" And I said, "Oh, I see I'm out of time right now. So let's do this again real soon." How's that for lack of honesty, right? But the point is he got it, and he
Right.
looked at me and he said, "Oh my God, Bill." He said, "I was just so excited to be out here." And I said, "That's perfectly okay." But you know what that did for me? That gave me a new way to interact with people from then on, where I consciously had the training wheels for the next 6 months to a year to make sure that I only asked questions when I met
Mhm.
with people the first time. That what I do, who I am, how you can network and send people to me is secondary to my becoming a friend with you and my getting to know you in a way that you want to share yourself with me. So I got to be you know, kind of known as somebody who digs deep on the first meeting. And the reason for that is we can't get to know each other fast enough to become somebody we know, like, and trust, right? Which is
Mhm.
the fundamental. Those are the three legs of the stool, and if one of them's longer than the others, then the stool tips to one side or the other. So how you start to monetize your friendships with people, which is what network is about. People think it's really weird that they should get referrals and business from people that they know. and they're doing networking in place of advertising, which is really smart. And it requires being as good as a networker in terms of the power of networking, as opposed to the force of running on for 45 minutes and not really demonstrating any understanding or care about who you're speaking with. And so what really kind of drove that home was at another networking meeting that this man was not at. People were starting to talk about how they had uh, kind of an odd experience with this guy. And at the end of what they had to say, they said, I can't refer my friends or people that I love, to this man and subject them to this. And he kind of got the message and stopped coming, to the networking group. But the force part of it is when you have somebody held captive as an audience and you don't recognize that. And I know both of you have lots to say on this subject. Who wants to go first?
I think there's so many levels of well, especially networking. When you first start networking, you don't realize, and especially now with Zoom, online meetings and stuff like that, it's the landscape has changed, but the results are still the same. So if you get somebody that's new and they're still into the selling aspect, and nobody wants to be sold, and that's ultimately what it comes down to. And then you get the people that have been going for a while, and you learn how to actually be with people and listen, like you said, and communicate with people rather than sell, because anybody can see that from 8 miles away, and
Yeah.
nobody wants it. But it takes people starting networking to learn that lesson and to back off or realize that they're not in a networking kind of business, and they should just, like your gentleman or person said, or did, just stop showing up. It's not my thing. And a lot of those, we're all used to the multi-level marketing systems, where you're afraid of them. So, and that's always done by networking and referrals. And I've been part of some of them. It's an seemingly easy thing to get caught up in, and then you do feel like you're being held captive, and sometimes in a good way, and then you want to be part of it, and then so it's all different levels of power and force and
Yep.
influence and intellect and wisdom coming in. You have to use them all.
I love that word influence, to influence people. But I think, when I go to a meeting, quite often, a networking meeting, one of the things they always say is you don't sell to the room. We're on Zoom. You don't sell to the room, you sell through the room.
Yes.
And so that's always what comes to my mind. And I tend to almost say, almost in a very group setting, I almost tend to say very little, because I really do want to get on one-on-ones with people, because I don't think anybody can learn what I do in 30 seconds, and so, or who I am anyway. So I'm always much more likely to just say, to actually help, like, encourage people to connect with me and have a one-on-one versus trying to tell people what I do in in 30 seconds or less.
It's kind of a cool thing because it's like learning a language. And first, it sounds like other words that you're used to hearing, like in French, bonjour, comment vas-tu? Sounds like, come on about you. But there's nothing could be further from the truth. And so you get somebody who hears that networking givers gain, and they don't know what that means at all, because they think that they show up and the people that are there are going to automatically start bringing them business. And when they don't, they get really upset about it. It's like, you guys aren't doing this right. No, hang on. We kind of have to vet you a minute or two. We have to make sure that when we send you out to somebody who's a good client of ours. So the other part of it is that along the way, taking the force of going through and doing tell me your 5 minutes, I'll tell you my 5 minutes, and we're going to forget everything we know about each other 5 minutes later, into asking open-ended, powerful questions that would make it worthwhile for both of us to give up 5 to 10 minutes apiece. And if it's really working, it usually goes for an hour and a half, you know, because not only are we getting to know each other, and it might be that the entire period of time, the hour and a half, neither one of us ever talks about what we do.
Mhm.
Mhm.
It's just, authentically and honestly answering questions back and forth and enjoying each other's company and making a quick, like turning, the speed up with just a little bit of motion where you start to build value for the next meeting, or you start to build value to become friends as opposed to just having coffee together. So I had to go from, belonging to 11 or 12 networking groups at the same time, having one-on-ones with everyone, to having a specific reason to have a one-on-one with anyone. And mostly my decision to go have a one-on-one with somebody was not that I thought they had the same clients as me, or not that I thought that I could refer people to them, but they looked like they were worth investing in, as human beings, just as friends.
Mhm.
You get to a certain point in business and you don't have time to have 1,000 friends at once. And Facebook satisfies that need for people. But the one-on-one time, it usually comes down to, in the course of a month, there might be a dozen people that you spend quality time with that really make a difference in terms of moving ahead. But it's kind of neat when I shared with you that meme that basically said, in a path to love, the solution is not finding the one. The solution is becoming the one.
Being the one. Yeah.
And I think that's a really good parable for life. That's a very great it's a koan that you can lose yourself in. What does that mean? Finding the one, isn't that what everybody does? Well, when we were young, do you remember people saying, I'm taking a year off of school so I can go find myself? I never heard back from anybody ever that they found themselves. Not one person, not ever.
I'm still thinking to myself, I'm still trying to find myself.
Right.
Well, that there's a statue of, I'm not sure who it's by. It might be Rodin, but it's the self-made man with a chisel and some marble and a hammer, and actually chipping away the marble to become the human being that they want to be. And so that's what 20 years of self-help, techniques and books and CDs and cassette tapes and all that kind of stuff. It's like, make some decisions about who you want to be when you grow up. And sometimes you're growing up between now and Thursday.
And the next minute. I
Exactly.
I was
I get
listening
it.
to that was kind of doing small synopsises of the book Essentialism, which I love, and it's kind of cool when you get somebody else's spin on it. And so to break it down to just like every decision you make, every yes or no you make is negating or affirming something else. So, if you decide to eat that piece of cake, well, you just said no to a healthy meal, or if you decide to sleep in, you just said no to help, to taking a walk, so and all those, every decision you make is like, oh, I just said no to that. Okay. Maybe I should say yes. It's kind of a cool thought process.
It is. It's also like one of those Chinese
Yeah.
finger things that the more you think about whether or not you're making the right choice, the less value there is in that thought process. You're wasting
I
your
bet.
Well, I was thinking that just on that note is this idea of if you look at every experience as an opportunity to learn,
Mhm.
every moment is really just an opportunity to learn. Like, you're just learning more about yourself.
yes.
And with every experience and in every situation. So in that way, do we ever really it's a constant sort of path to learning about yourself and figuring out that you are the one and that you don't need to look for the one.
Right. When you are the one, you will attract the right people and the right person. You know, it really doesn't happen any different than that. But if as I was saying to you, Lisa, you know that finger thing or the wrist one that they use, the only way to get out of the damn thing is to relax.
Yeah, is to not work, right? Exactly.
Is just to find the humor in the situation, relax, and let the thing go back to its natural state, and then gently pull your fingers out. So if you use that questioning mentality to find the humor in a situation and to be mindful while you're doing that, very powerful, very
Or the
powerful.
beauty too, the beauty,
Yeah.
because I mean, simple things. Like I decided to walk every morning, and now I'm kind of addicted to it. Now, before I used to claim to be a night person, that I never liked the mornings, and even not that long ago, it had to be a certain temperature for me to go outside and walk, kind of thing. Nothing drastic, but but now I don't even think about it, and because I had a secondary knowledge of the benefits of being outside, for your eyesight, just for your being, for sleeping, for everything, that it's got so many benefits to just get yourself outside first thing in the morning. So I think because of that, it's now a good decision for me to do that. I am saying yes to that kind of healthy new way of beginning my day, but it's not something I would have thought of before, and I wouldn't do it without that extra knowledge of the extra benefit of doing it. And I'm not sure why that is, but I'd like to have multiple benefits. Like I love casserole, so the more things together, the better. So if I can get a whole bunch of things in one activity, then I think that I just solved my own question. That's why I do it.
And
And it
they
might be a different why tomorrow, by the way.
What's that?
It might be a different why tomorrow.
Oh, yeah, but there's just the beauty of chasing the sun is what I do now because
I
it's just
like it. Sorry,
well,
Jan.
no, I was just going to say mornings are my favorite time of the day, and that's always because there's a quietness in the morning. There's just when it first comes up, especially if you get up really early, when it's dark and when you first see the sun, you see very few people. It almost reminds me of like when it snows and it's really quiet. Like that's how I feel about the early mornings. There's just this quietness.
Well, in fact, um, my dear wife has been working the last 4 days, Friday through yesterday, and out the door usually by 6:30 in the morning. And then I sit here quietly by myself. And this morning, the both of us rolled out of bed just a little bit before 7 because sometimes it's kind of nice to do that. And while I'm sitting here having my first sip of coffee, she's sharing with me all these Facebook memes and things about, that happen to postal carriers. And here's something from this blog that's so cool. And it's just going on and on and on and on. And I sit over and I think to myself, would this be better if I were alone right now? And I looked over at her for a second and I thought, no way. What happened? She got quiet for a little while. I didn't say anything. She just got really quiet for a little while. She looked over at me and she smiled. About 15, 20 minutes later, neither one of us had said a word. She said, "It's really nice, isn't it?" I said, "Yeah." And she goes, "Yeah, this just sitting here, just enjoying the quiet, just being able to be,
Hmm.
no pressure to do something, nobody's calling me." And you know, picking your line in when you're doing anything and then navigating that line first awkwardly and then later with some skill and then finally where it's just not even something you have to think about in order to excel at it. That living in life goes from the force of feeling like you must make yourself do something to the power of being completely sure that what you're doing is absolutely right, especially for this moment.
I like the idea for this moment that you said, Bill. I was on a call the other day and we were having this whole um, conversation about self care. And it was really interesting because I think that people think of self-care like I'm going to go take like a Calgon bath kind of thing, and that's the, but this woman said, "Oh, I consider self-care when I get up in the morning and I actually listen to what I feel like doing. That to me is self-care." And when you said that, I thought that to me is also a real idea. That's to me like an advanced form of self care, where you have the ability to kind of listen to yourself and say, okay, well, I don't feel well today, so I don't, I do need more sleep. And being able to do that for yourself.
Yeah. Yes, as my Australian friend used to say, very powerful, very powerful. See, the neat part of it is his power is whatever you say it is. It's not something to argue over. It's either the feeling that everything is flowing and it works as it should with nothing to change. But, the power is, like I said before, with two people, think about Fred Astaire and that beautiful woman that he danced with and was married to for all those years. And did you ever remember seeing either one of them fall down? Of course, they probably wouldn't put that in the movie, but or make the other person do something. And what they shared with us was just this exchange of power from one to the other. Whether it's doing a twirl and, Ginger Rogers goes out, feet off the ground. And the thought you're having is what is he doing to my little girl, And the next thing you know, she comes down into this beautiful landing. And I don't know. So going out in the morning, first thing, Lisa, you get to go out and just be ultimately powerful in terms of what you see. I will get that later. Not family this week, ladies and gentlemen. That was a good friend and a client. I'll call him back in a few. So the thing is, that old saying that any situation's outcome is affected by the observer?
Mhm.
And from a force standpoint, that could be interpreted one way, but from a power standpoint, it can be interpreted 100 different ways. Doing a desire test or doing that question of, does this move me closer or further away from what my intended result is, or the life that I want to live effortlessly? Is it effortless? Is effortless the one you want, or are you creating a completely different experience of every moment for yourself?
And
So
as you're
you,
speaking, yeah, I'm thinking the word energy when you're saying power, really, two people dancing, that's sharing energy. And so that's, it could be another use of that shared energies, influencing each other's energies. Um, that kind of play on the word makes a lot more sense as far as what we could do with ourselves and each other.
I love that because at you know that's that old saying, if you just need to know you matter. Unless you're moving faster than the speed of light, then you energy. And the neat part of it is what's powerful is the efficacy and the efficiency and the capability and capacity to use energy wisely and maximize its good in the world for both you and and others. That's what translates it into power. But it's all energy, isn't it? Isn't that the coin of the realm for all of us?
Well, even the simple, I mean, energies like, you do the simple body testing of if something's good or bad for you. And, if the positive is moving forward when you ask a question of yourself, even if this food is good for me, and your body should fall forward if it is good, and take a leap backwards if it's not, kind of thing. And but you have to believe in that kind of energy too. So that's the interesting part of that.
Well, the other part of it is, well, what if you don't know the answer to it? We got to try this and learn something from it.
Yeah. No, you don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, you don't always know.
Once you've decided that something is not good for you, whether it is or isn't it's not an issue any longer. You'll never
Right.
know. So
Or it
that's
is.
where that
It is. Yeah. Whether you think it is or it isn't, you're right, kind of thing.
exactly. Yeah, Henry Ford. So,
Yeah.
so the amazing part of life is again, as I so brilliantly say, the questions that you ask yourself and how you answer them and how you ask another question and how that all kind of weaves together. You can see that in some people's lives they're worried and living under a self-imposed force field of badness
Hmm.
with no way out, because they don't know you have to relax to get out of the finger cuffs, right? It just seems like if I do it right and hard enough and often enough, it's going to work one of these days.
But what you're saying, Bill, is I think there is, or I'm reminded of the word energy upon which you approach something.
Yeah.
So there is, let's say, a certain regimen, let's say, that you believe is the key to living healthy.
Yes.
And I think that it depends on how you approach that kind of belief or the way you do certain things. If you are looking at it almost like in a loving kind of energy of like, oh, I'm taking care of myself, this is great, as opposed to the like negative, which is, oh my gosh, where you don't feel like you can do anything because you're constantly watching on guard or like on guard for something. I
Sure.
think it has a very different feeling. And therefore, if you go by the feeling, that's what's going to determine whether you like, whether you believe you're living a healthy, fulfilled life.
What I like about what you're saying, Jan, is that it has been proven over and over and over in many, many areas and many disciplines that the key to having um, balance in your life isn't to do only certain things at the exclusion of all others. It's about moderation. Like, for instance, nobody can go all year without having a cookie or an ice cream, you know? However, most people who go on a so-called diet, I like doing air quotes because I don't know what they mean, but they go on a so-called diet, which there's no such thing. It's called an eating plan for which there are gates for a yes or no decision, right? But the ones who actually get the healthy lifestyle are the ones that choose what they want to do, and they look at each opportunity with a full expectation that the answer can be either yes or no, but it's worth asking more questions about. That way, no one suffers. And if you want to have a cookie, you can have a damn cookie. You might want to make that choice, later on that, well, just not this one. But the point to all of it is the difference between being dominated and forced to do something. And this is what happens with newbies a lot, right? Have you ever heard there's nothing worse than a convert? Because they think they know something and they proceed to beat everybody around them with this newfound knowledge. And as a result of that, they miss out on the fun. They miss out on the journey for themselves to really get all the juice that there is out of living this life.
I was just at a workshop this weekend, and the gentleman started with, "How many of you think you know a little bit about the subject, or or enough, or know nothing about the subject, or very little?" And so those of us that raised our hand and said we know very little, he goes, "You're our favorites because you have no preconceived notions to either contest the teacher, or the writings or whatever."
Exactly right. You know, the person that thinks things are written down in stone somewhere in the world is not forgiving to anything they hear that doesn't line up with what they already know. And there's no opportunity to learn. There's no opportunity to investigate because the knowledge of whatever subject is there for you isn't where, I mean, that's the booby prize, right? If all you could do for the whole rest of your life is know what you know and not grow, that's not winning, okay? The fun is where you can be confident that you've thought through what you think you know and are really interested in more information on the subject. What do you got? I want to hear all about that.
I forget how Ken puts it too, because he always talks about the like the most dangerous person is the one that knows a little bit or something like that. I forget how he puts
Or
it.
thinks they know a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And in some cases that can be very empowering. In other cases, it's kind of ugly to watch. You know, it's no fun for anybody involved with it.
Or maybe like you said, the first time you learn something. So there is like a kind of level of convert in there, but so now you know something, so now you want to share it, or you're going to lord it over other people, or
Yeah, they learn 5 or 6 phrases that are intended to correct other people and put them on the right path, and
yeah.
that's all the further they ever go, and a year later, they've dropped out and they're doing something else the same way. You would be my personal poster child, Lisa, for somebody who is just out there on the edge, grabbing every bit of juice that is possible every single day, and being so generous as to document and share it.
Yeah. Oh, thanks.
You know,
It was kind of interesting too because it was a class on philosophy, so and philosophers always get down to the basic core of unity and humanity. I mean, if you break it down, and the way some of the teachers were talking was like, we are the light, we are immortal, and so my sister went with me, and she was saying like to her that almost sounded cultish, and then I went, isn't that's kind of sad that when people start talking like we are the light and we are one and we are that, to most people that sounds like airy fairy or not quite right. And then
well,
I'm thinking about that it is the right, it is the rightest of it all. you know
so the fun isn't knowing that sentence. The fun is going through and doing the work to find out what that sentence means for you.
right.
No two people are going to experience that the same way. However, the newbie or the convert think there's only one right answer. And we are the light, you know. What does that mean? What does that mean? See, that's the place you want to come from.
Right.
And the BS detectors go on in human beings when they start to think, is there money associated with this somewhere? Is someone going to get paid? So now it's like, it's easy to tell people that it's a simple thing and thank you for your $5,000. You're just trying too hard. If you will only relax, you will do much better. $5,000, please. It's the difference between wisdom and quackery, right?
Well, I love watching things on YouTube this morning. I was watching Russell Brand interview Eckhart Tolle this morning, and
Wow.
yeah, it was kind of, and it was just a short 15-minute clip, but in that whole 15 minutes, I think Russell Brand said two short sentences, and he was wise enough to know, even though he's such
Uncommentary
a
for him.
yeah, right, because he's such a chatterbox anyhow. So for him to let Eckhart speak, because he knew, this is the one you want to listen to,
Right.
and it was because and Eckhart's saying that in the world we are today, most people are stupid, and he used the word stupid. And that's intellect without using wisdom is what we have an abundance of right now. So I just thought it was funny that Russell Brand put himself in the background and let.
Yeah. And he was standing on the technical definition, not the pejorative.
Mhm.
To call someone stupid typically is to say, you're not smart enough to be in this conversation with me. What he's saying is people aren't interested. Like ignorance is bliss and I refuse to be made unhappy, right?
Mhm.
But I can't picture Russell Brand. You send me the link for that YouTube video because that
Okay.
sounds like worth 15 minutes of my time. He's freaking brilliant, both with how he interacts with people, because he's typically either doing a podcast himself where he's espousing these beliefs and everything, and asking people to take a look at what they think they know is the truth and
Hmm.
examine it in terms of another light. He shines a different kind of a light on it. Or he goes into a den of people who are out to make him look bad, a
Hmm.
panel or something on a newscast or something of that nature, and then he just completely fillets them and takes everything away and leaves them sitting there, and they have no idea what just happened.
Nope.
And he's more than a comedian. He's George Carlin at the end of his days was starting to approach what Russell Brand has been for 10 years. A person who can look at the world and honestly present it in so many different ways that you get to choose whether or not you agree with him. It's not always my way or the highway. So to hear that he can listen as well as he can speak, that's very empowering for me.
Eckhart even said that they're both doing the same thing in some very different ways.
Yeah. How we get there doesn't matter, but the
Right.
destination being the same, maybe we can walk along together for a while. Are you a Russell Brand fan, Jan?
To be honest, I've never listened to him.
We will be sending you YouTube videos.
Okay.
And
Feel
I'll tell
free.
you and I'll tell you what it's really good for is disassociating yourself from the significance of daily life.
Well, and he has different podcasts. So this one, it's actually, I think it's called Awakening with Russell Brand. So he's
Yeah,
got different levels of things.
Well, if
that
any sounds more to be my liking,
Right.
probably than
You would
maybe,
like it. You would like this part. Yeah.
will
yeah.
probably start there with you as opposed to him dressing somebody down and making them wish that they'd never heard his name.
Yeah, I think I prefer, yeah, a good choice.
But he usually only does that when it's a situation where those people are intentionally trying to tell him something that's completely untrue. And like if you knew anything at all, you'd already know this. This would not even be a question for you. And he says, "When was the last time you ever questioned anything? Have you ever questioned whether or not you're getting up out of bed in the right home, or where you're going to work today is where you should be going to work?" Or he just gets into a situation with very few words, makes them regret they ever said anything to him in the first place. And
And
his
he, yeah, he
accent is
did.
cool too.
Yeah, and he did have his lunatic days. I mean, he's been clean and sober for a while now, so that made all the difference too.
This is true. Absolutely true. Look what it did for Robert Downey Jr. It made him into Iron Man.
There you go.
That's the whole the people who survive and flourish and aren't successful because they got somewhere. It's because they got the miracle of their daily life right now, the journey. That's another thing that people get paid $5,000 to say. There is no destination, there is only the journey. And now what? Well, knowing that wherever you're going to always be right here, why not take a minute or two and enjoy what's happening right now? That's the difference between the performance goal and the wisdom goal. The performance goal is I want to see how quickly I can get to XYZ. And the wisdom goal is I want to see what it feels like to go for this and really go for it.
And I think that's the beauty of challenging yourself too to something new, or even asking those better questions. Because without having little challenges and wins every day, or looking at everything like it is a small win. I managed to get something in the mail today, which I'd been harping over for, like a week or so, and I did it, that kind of thing, and
It's crazy. What I love
celebrate.
about Go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say celebrate it. If you don't have the little wins set up, it just doesn't. But you have to notice them too. You have to
That's
make it.
right.
Yeah, you have to make it like.
Well, yeah, you have to acknowledge them.
Yeah.
I actually was, I'm doing a mentoring program and something happened and coach just said to me, "So did you like did you like acknowledge yourself for this?" I hadn't even thought about to do that, which was
Mhm.
also a reflection on like a way that I had to reflect and thinking to myself like I had missed it and had they not pointed it out, I don't know that I would have noticed it. And so in what I guess another question is in what in your life are you taking notice of?
Mm.
There's another meme that I saw recently. I'm probably going to butcher it, but here goes anyway. So the man said, um, "I'm not really sure, God, what my purpose in life is." And God said, "Well, perhaps your purpose in life was petting that dog, or listening to that young man tell you a story about his day, or helping that older person with their groceries into the back of their car. Unfortunately, you seem to think that what your life is about and what your purpose is has something to do with your achievement." He said, "It's not about your achievement. And the sooner you learn that, you can get on to your true purpose. The universe is not interested in your achievement."
So for those people that don't understand that, I just I don't usually post like sometimes I don't post sayings, but I just posted this today was let people go. If they don't want to ride the sexy, strange, magical, once in a lifetime, radical, mystical, and ever evolving human fun train that is your frequency, that's their loss. Moving along.
100%. Don't go away mad.
Just go away.
I just
So we know a little bit more about empowerment or power or force, or are we at a place where we're possibly going to be able to ask a little better questions about it?
Better questions always, right?
Yeah.
Or at least question. Don't have to be good, bad, or indifferent.
Mhm.
I find myself the metaphor that I would use, and in a lot of areas in my life where it's important for me to know things, like to have the knowledge about something, is a little bit like Arnold Schwarzenegger, and his trying to find out, what the predator looks like. And all he can do, he can't see the predator. He can get smacked in the face by the predator, and he can see where the predator knocks things down in front of him. And then when he finally becomes visible, it doesn't look anything like what Arnold Schwarzenegger thought the predator was going to look like. And so being able to see the predator is a fool's challenge. That's a fool's errand. Being able to see how you react to the predator and what the predator situation brings you in terms of opportunity to learn is far better. And you can think, all of us can think of something that's causing a little pain in our life, that if we just had the answer to that, the answer is let it go. It doesn't matter. Give it up. It's not worth suffering for.
I always think of to what I think you said earlier is looking to myself to think to myself, why does this, like in a situation, why does this make me feel so uncomfortable? When something happens or somebody said that, like, what is it triggering within me to cause me to have a reaction at all?
It's a great start. It's a really great start. And if you think about it in terms of all experiences, it's a lesson. And you always know that discomfort that you feel in that circumstance is a lesson. Then what is the lesson? What is what is the thing that's going to keep showing up in your life over and over and over until you get it?
Mhm.
Now it's disappeared and it's gone forever. Notice you lose no sleep over any of the things you don't think about.
Well, then I think I come back to one of the philosophy um, ways of combating that. Well, so their phrase is, the fruit of negative thinking is endless suffering, and the cure for that is to remember that statement.
And every once in a while, try something else.
Well, it flips it. It flips it. Stops it right there. Dead stops it almost. Well, there's no need in keep harboring on that thought pattern because it's not serving me at all. Done. Next.
That's the master, after years and years and years of grappling with that simple sentence, that sooner or later, to me, in the 1990s, rather than being upset and carrying something around, I just visualized a reset button and getting another Mario. And now I'm ready to rock and roll, slightly less encumbered by what I think I know and I'm upset about. And at the end of the day, it's really not there. It's a boogie monster that I created in my own head, and I've been playing with and making it so much more delicious, and so many more brushstrokes, and see and how powerful, and this is why I can't, and
giving it power.
Bing, reset.
Another form of power, giving it power, right?
Giving it power, exactly.
Well, ladies and esteemed listeners, we're getting to the end of our hour, and I'm just wondering, any final thoughts before we sign off for this week?
I think one of the most important, like at the end, even if it's just at the end of the day, to look back and consider your wins for the day, even if it's something like you made the best sandwich ever, or you did the dishes, or you finally made your bed, anything. Just look at it and just celebrate those little wins and the big ones too.
And then I guess I would say take a moment to just find something, because there's always something to feel grateful for. Since we're coming on Thanksgiving, could be, the clouds. I mean, it doesn't have to be anything dramatic. I mean, I always say the simple things are the best things.
Mm-hmm.
I agree with you. And my final statement is, every week we get together and we converse, and nothing we say is true. Nothing we say is true. But guess what? In life, you can either go through life having considerations and operating in a way where you are hampered by what you can't see, or you can ask the audience, or you can phone a friend. Almost all things, I'm going to go out on a limb here, you can say, Bill, you can't say that, but I'm going to say this. All things that made a difference in the universe were as a result of a conversation. And with that said, we are lighting the candle, a world that works. Here's to your world that works every single time. Bye-bye for now.
Have a good week.
Have a good week.
And don't forget to reach out to 30 people before the end of the year and let them know that you care and you're thinking about them. Bye.
You've been listening to Lighting the Candle, a world that works, part of the Exvadio Podcast Network. You can catch us each week, as well as the rest of the network, at exvadio.com/podcasts, as well as the Apple Podcasts app, Google Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, Audible, Amazon Music, and wherever you find podcasts.